be a light for you in dark places when all other lights go out.
Hey guys, DCHL Devin here, and I wanted to bring to you a special guest, one of our top DCHL players, Cole. So, you say hi, Cole. He's a shy guy. Actually, you've gone Nova before last year, and you played against all the GBHL hosts.
Yeah.
I think you did fairly well. I think they commented on you in one of their review videos. Damien and Tom. Yeah. You had some thoughts on one of the Piercing Strike today, right?
Yeah, Piercing Strike in particular.
All right, so this is going to be like a special Light in the Dark video where I'm actually not hosting it necessarily. Cole's just going to take about 5 minutes and explain to you why you guys might think that Piercing Strike is sort of like an easy, all right, just do it automatically thing, but there's actually more of a formula to it than you guys actually know. And that's what Cole here is going to explain today. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and let you take it away.
All right, thank you, Devin. All right, so Piercing Strike I've always found to be one of the more interesting special strikes. A lot of people tend to think of it as a kind of one and done. You throw it out there when you have the cheaper model or the higher fight value, and you gain D3 strength, and hopefully you kill your opponent you're fighting. But what I've always found interesting about it is that you both gain D3 strength, and if you lose D3 defense, which is effectively the same as your opponent gaining D3 strength. So when you're calling a Piercing Strike, you're also giving your opponent a Piercing Strike. And obviously it is one of the more powerful special strikes out there, so that shouldn't be thought of lightly. Because of the way that wounding works in SVG, if you look at the wound chart, the only time you're ever guaranteed to get +1 to wound is when you gain 2 strength, not 1. And because Piercing Strike works on a D3 scale, based on your strength value and the opponent's defense value, and the opponent's strength value and your defense value, you can actually get very, 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 very different results out of a Piercing Strike based on whether your values match up correctly against their values. So let's take a scenario of a model that normally has an axe, a dwarf warrior with a shield, fight 4, strength 3, defense 7, against, let's say, a Mirkwood armored elf with a glaive. Fight 5, strength 3, defense 4. Now, normally, you would think Piercing Strike on the dwarf is not necessarily the right option. You're just making it easier for the elf to kill you, and obviously the elf has a higher chance of winning because the elf has higher fight value. But actually, statistically, the Piercing Strike is doing a lot more for you than it is for the elf. Because if you are the dwarf warrior and you win, you have strength 3 and the opponent has defense 4. If you roll a 1 to a 2 on your D3, you're gaining 1 strength, and you're going up from wounding on 5s to wounding on 4s. You're getting an extra +1 to wound. And if you roll a 3 and 4, the same thing happens. You go up to strength 5 against defense 4. You have +1 to wound. If you roll a 5 or a 6, you go up to strength 6, and you have a +2 to wound against the Mirkwood elf, which is obviously very good. You're guaranteed +1 to wound if you win the fight, and you have the chance of getting +2 to wound. It's very important. Now, if you lose the fight and you go down by D3 defense, on a 1 or a 2, you'll lose 1 defense and you'll go down to defense 6. Now, the Mirkwood elf has strength 3. They're still wounding you on a 6. They don't get anything out of that. There's a chance that the Piercing Strike has no negative effects for you. Now, on a 3 through a 6, you're going to end up losing 2 to 3 defense, which will bring you down to defense 5 or defense 4, both of which are wounded from strength 3 on 5s, which is effectively a +1 to wound to the Mirkwood elf. So basically, when you call a Piercing Strike on your dwarf warrior, you are, if you win the fight, guaranteeing yourself +1 to wound with the chance of +2 to wound. And if you lose the fight, the opponent has a chance to get nothing out of it, and the most they can possibly get is +1 to wound. So this is the dream scenario for a Piercing Strike. You're just getting far more out of the Piercing Strike than your opponent is. Now let's take a look at the inverse scenario. You have a Iron Guard against your opponent's Mirkwood elf with glaive, maybe. So defense 4, strength 3. You have strength 4. So when you gain an extra strength, you're not getting anything out of it. And the most you can possibly get out of calling a Piercing Strike is a +1 to wound. Whereas with defense 6 against strength 3, you're guarding pretty well against the Mirkwood elf's attacks. But if you go down by 1 defense, they're already getting +1 to wound. And if you go down by 3, then they're going to be wounding you on 4s. In that scenario, you're getting a whole lot less out of the piercing strike than your opponent is. Your opponent is getting far more chances to wound you, and it's just going to be a far more effective strike. And so in a situation like that, where your values match up against the opponent's values, such that you will always be losing, and you could end up losing by 2, and if you win, you could get nothing, you should never piercing strike, regardless of how cheap your model is. You're just not getting enough out of the strike, and your opponent's just getting too much out of the strike. And in the scenario aforementioned with the Dwarf Warrior, you're getting so much out of it that even if your opponent has higher fight value than you, you should pretty much always be doing that strike, because the chances to wound that you're getting are just too high to pass up. Now, there are in-between scenarios, of course, where your strength might match up well, but your defense doesn't match up well. So your opponent's getting a guaranteed +1 to wound and the chance at a +2 to wound. And you're getting a guaranteed +1 to wound and a chance at a +2 to wound. And in those situations, you've got to be a little bit more discerning. You're thinking about the scenario as a whole, whether or not you really need this kill, who's going to win the fight, who has higher fight value, who's the cheaper model, whether or not you can afford to expend your model. And in those situations, as a general, you've got to consider what exactly you want to do. But in the other two scenarios, you should either never be piercing striking or you should always be piercing striking, because statistically, it's just going to work out for you better.
All right, guys, and there you have it. Cole giving his analysis of piercing strike. And so it's actually a lot more thinking involved with that than most of you guys knew. Many players often associate piercing strike with, if you have low defense, just do it. And if you have high defense, never do it. It's not really actually the case, as you point out.
Yeah, you can get a lot more out of piercing strike. You can really optimize what you're doing with it if you look at the opponent's defense values and look at your own values.
Exactly. And honestly, I'd love to say that we have quite the same analysis for the other weapon strikes, but
yeah, I'm really not
really
sure. There's not much to them, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, most of them, and we could just run down them really fast, but I mean, just and really, really briefly, but like Bash, we find there's really almost not too many situations.
Maybe against the Ring Wraith on Fellbeast, but even then you're rolling against Strength 6. You're not going to win.
Yeah, it's really tough. You can get a 4 when they would need to roll a 1 in order for to really pull that out, so assuming you have a strength of 3. Even beyond that, the analysis really doesn't go too far. That's why most people don't really do it. There is very rare circumstances. I kind of named one that was kind of like a give me to, but it was if you happen to have like something with 2 attacks, like let's say you have a Grimhammer and an Iron Guard, and your Iron Guard has 2 attacks, and your Grimhammer has just 1, so you have 3 attacks total. You could technically knock the model down, assuming you're not trapping him already, and then double with the 2 attack guy, so you go to 4 attacks rather than 3.
I mean, even that, it's never going to happen. I mean, if you're someone who's competitive enough to mix Erebor and Durance Folk, you're probably not taking a Grimhammer.
Then that's probably true as well.
I mean, if you're trying to optimize your list by just taking from everything, again, chances are you're not really thinking about Grimhammers in there.
Maybe as Grimhammers change their profile in the edition that comes up in October, we might see something new, and then you could use the hammer in that effect. If you have an Iron Guard supported by a spear, that's actually a further more attacks. Now you're going to 6 attacks versus the 4 you would have had. So as long as you're not trapping the opponent, we've noticed it kind of exponentially increases in a way, like maybe exponentially might be the wrong word, but you get the point, a little more increase. The other one's really straightforward. Fainting, it's pointless. You might as well just do it every time if you have multiple combatants with a spear support.
Yeah, whatever. No reason not to.
Yeah, the piercing, the stunning, it's pretty much you're just anti-monster. Generally the ones who have it generally don't do well in fights anyway, wizards, stuff like that. And then flails. I think we discussed the idea of running in ruffians one at a time to try to take advantage of the flail.
Yeah, maybe you'll get a big whirl off, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's going to be such a crapshoot with it. I think I've never seen anybody use whirl.
I don't think I've ever seen it used effectively.
You've seen it used.
I think I watched the GBHL, what was it called? Middle-earth's Deadliest Warbands or something like that.
Okay.
And, they tried to get a whirl off on ruffians, but it never really happens.
Yeah, it's such a good... But anyway, hopefully you guys got something, though, from the Piercing Strike. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below about what you think about Cole's analysis of Piercing Strike. Did you not think of it quite that way? With that in mind, though, we'll get into some questions, just a few from the channel, and just answer them here with Cole. So the first question we have is actually from Alec Van Bukim, I believe. So he says, help me counter this 500 nasty list, 500-point list. I'm playtesting it with my sister, and I wouldn't dare bring it to my local GW or even a tournament. Nobody will want to play me anymore. He wants to counter this with mainly Lothlorien. So I'll have the list on the screen, guys, and here we're looking at Gundabad Blackshield Shaman, Moria Goblin Shaman, Groblog, then 8 Warg Marauders, all right, and then 5 Gundabad Blackshields with shields, and then 5 Moria Goblins with spears. So he's thinking about spamming Wood Elf Sentinels, but you need to take Legolas to snipe the Moria Shaman, because the Marauders are going to pass Courage tests anyway with Fury. Otherwise, I don't know, man. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the list it's scary. 8 Warg Marauders is always going to be something to face down, but I would note that they oftentimes won't be affected by Fury. I mean, your Goblin Shaman can move 5 inches per turn, and your Warg Marauders can move 10 inches per turn. If they really want to be taking advantage of that movement, they're not going to be in Fury range, which means Sentinels actually are going to be a viable option. But what I would prefer to see from Lothlorien and Mirkwood list, I'm assuming you're taking both if you're bringing in Legolas, is Thranduil. If you get that Terrifying Aura up, then he's going to need to keep his Warg Marauders within 6 of the Goblins, the Goblin Shaman, which means that they are only going to be moving 5 inches per turn. And that means you're going to have extra turns of Bowfire. If you deploy back, hopefully you'll take out 3 or so of the Warg Marauders before they reach you. I mean, Strength 3 Archery on Defense 5, it can happen.
At that point, once you've taken out quite enough of them, even with range, his numbers are going to be so small that it might cause some serious problems. Especially once he breaks and if you kill his Shaman. He has no combat heroes to speak of, so all he's got are these Warg Marauders. One note, you do outfight him like crazy, so that's kind of an interesting fact. I think, otherwise, other than those 8 Warg Marauders, the list itself isn't too strong. Shatter might become a problem, I imagine.
Yeah.
He'll probably try to shatter maybe specific things that you have. I guess a bow. From Legolas. No, once you're in the 12-inch range, they'll probably just start charging you.
And Legolas has 3 will as well. No, he has 2 will, doesn't he?
No, he has 2. Yeah,
he has 2 will.
3-2-3 is his
So he's got a decent chance at resisting the shatter attempt anyway. And, you don't really have many pure combat heroes in that list. You take Thranduil, he can fight, but it's not huge. You're mainly taking him for the Nature's Wrath.
I actually think you're going to
Or of Dismay. Yeah, probably.
The thing is, you have cheap heroes. You take the Legolas, well, cheap-ish heroes. Legolas, Thranduil, and then just hoard out on like your normal Wood Elf warriors and making sure you get as many bows as possible. And have Thranduil on the list. And he's really, you're not only going to outshoot him, but you're going to have so many more dice than him that you actually should be able to take him on even when the fight reaches, especially if you've killed a couple of his dudes already.
Yeah, definitely. If you were to take Rumil, Legolas, and bargain bin Thranduil, you could probably get a good 2.5 warbands out of just elf spam.
Oh yeah, we should mention, we're talking about the Thranduil with Nature's Wrath and Art of Dismay. Yeah, not the fighting version. Yeah, other than that, now here's one quick thing, and I'll flip the script a little bit for you, Cole. Just curious. What about, instead of firing at the Warg Marauders, trying to eliminate as many of them as possible, what about taking out their support units, those models, all the other goblins, and that way trying to break him? Because what's his break limit? His break limit, he's got 10 plus 3, so he's got 13 plus 8, so 21.
So you need to kill 11.
You only need to kill 11. That means all the goblins. So if you focus fire on all the goblins and then take out the Goblin Shaman that has Fury, he'll be broken, and his Warg Marauders will just leave.
Yeah, I mean, if you're auto-hitting the Shaman with Legolas, you can just burn some might and guarantee the kill.
Yeah, he's only got one fate. Yeah, he might have Fury off, but other than that, so that is kind of a consideration in my mind, because here's the thing. With Fury activated, and it's going to be a 5-up save, and you're sitting there firing all your bow fire into a Warg Marauder, every wound you get really, really means something. You want it to mean something. So in my opinion, and this is just how I would take it, I would shoot everything I've got at the little guys, the goblins surrounding him, and honestly, what I think is going to happen is your opponent's going to want to protect the Warg Marauders by putting them behind the little guys anyway. So as he's moving this 5-inch pace and he sees all your bows, so I think he's going to view his Warg Marauders as his special snowflakes, and then you can just take out the guys in the front, and you'll end up breaking them.
Yeah. The one thing I worry about with that is the Gundabad Black Shield's defense 6 with strength 3 is not nearly as effective against it.
Yep.
And you're a little bit more reliant on the dice going your way. But if they do, I mean, you could definitely break them before he reaches you. They move 5 inches a turn. If you're moving back 3 a turn, they're only gaining 2 inches on you each turn.
Yeah.
Until you hit the back edge of the board, of course.
So if they do decide, and this is the last point, if they finally actually decide to just say, all right, well, you're going to keep backing up, I'm going to send my Warg Marauders out, fantastic. Good. You just piecemealed him. He'd let you do it for him. So
definitely. Another thing to note as well is that the very first turn the Warg Marauders hit you, they're not going to do anything because you're going to be able to call Nature's Wrath and just knock them all down. I know that you can't dismount the Warg Marauders. That's one of the great things about them. But they're not going to be doing any damage that turn, and you're probably going to get off a couple of trapped kills on them while they're on the ground.
And actually, that Nature's Wrath is the perfect anti for them once they actually do meet that battle line. So, yeah, that's how we would counter it. Let us know your thoughts in the below. How would you counter with the Lothlorien if it's any different from the way we just said here? So, I guess we'll go into the next question from King Bunzai. He actually has 2 questions here. We'll go with the first one. He says, for the GT, how do we separate the different groups, such as GBHL, DCHL, or my group, the NEME-SVG? How will we be grouped up for the GT Affliction? Thanks.
Well, I'm going to cede this one to Devin. I really don't know much about the Nova groupings.
So he's talking about Nova, guys. The tournament that's coming up in about 3 weeks, and or 2. It's almost like 2 weeks now. Wow.
I think so.
We are really close. It's like 2 weeks away. So the way that gets paired up is basically it's who you traveled with, and you can declare yourself as part of a 4-man group. This is not quite the same as Articon. Articon, you guys have a 4 to 8-man group, and you basically just say who you are, and it's just like this World Team Championships. Nova is not a World Team Championship type of event. It's not trying to pose to be the same thing as the way Articon does it. Instead, what it's doing is it prevents you from fighting each other. All right, your scores will be tallied up together, sure, but there's not like, I wouldn't think of it as like a World Team Championship the way Articon has it. It's more like, hey, the GBHL flew together, they probably don't want to play against each other, and hence I prevent you guys from ever being paired. So as far as your group, you would do exactly the same thing. Is there an award for this? Yes, but it's not treated as seriously. It's simply put, you guys came together, and even if you didn't fly together, you can just simply say, hey, I don't want to play the guys I play in my own local group, and I acknowledge that, and I put you guys on your own team. So therefore, you just don't play each other. And that's really as simple as it is. That's kind of the gist of it. For some groups that are so large, like the DCHL, obviously this is our home territory, so there's so many of us that I can't guarantee us that we won't play together. So we just have like a sponsored DCHL team, I guess. Mostly it's our best players all lined up, so that way they don't fight each other, and that way we can try to knock the GBHL off their totem pole of winning. But yeah, that's essentially how that works. It's just a bunch of groups of 4-man teams, so they don't play each other. Hopefully I answered that question, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, cool. So, and then we'll get into one last question here from King Bunzai. What are your predictions for the top 10 players at the Nova GT and the armies they might bring? Cole, what DCHL members do you think? And actually, not even just DCHL, because as you know, we got some top players from other groups. Who are you thinking might be in the top ranks?
Well, I personally place a good bet on Jake placing very well. I expect him to bring his elves, his Mirkwood elves.
If you guys don't know who Jacob is, it's the guy who he's also still on the channel. He basically just hasn't been on the channel for a little bit, but he's a guest who comes on more regularly. And last year, he actually was running up against Tom Harrison for the GBHL. He was actually runner-up for that first place. It's just Tom beat him so badly that he got knocked all the way back down. Tom beat him 10-0, which at first is like, oh, well, then I guess he's not all that great. But one, he's fighting Tom. And two,
he was very new at the game at the time.
he was extremely new. Consider this, guys. Jake had only been playing the game. Started SBG 1 month before Nova. 1 month, and he's on top table with Tom. After 1 month, he didn't even know what his opponents could do. He just trusted. He's like, I don't know, what can your stuff do? And he just went with it. And he's very, very tactically minded in that way. So we're definitely expecting some good stuff. You think he's going to play Mirkwood?
I think he's probably going to play Mirkwood. He could also take his Felbeast. He does that sometimes, but...
The thing about the Felbeast, and I've noticed, is because of his new nature, sometimes he makes mistakes, and you cannot make mistakes with that list.
No, you cannot.
It's that as one player learned, he brought Felbeast armies to Nova last year. He ended up in last place because it's a hard list to play. It is not a guaranteed win.
Yeah. Even if you are incredibly skilled, you still need the dice to go your way with it too. I mean, if you get a bad roll, you lose a Felbeast, and the game can just tank for you.
Yes. So Ed Ball shows quite a bit of skill using that list. Who else do you think from DCHO?
I would probably say Matt Iverson.
No, Matt Iverson's from the New England group. Actually, he's from the same group that King Bonsai's in. So yeah, I'd say Matt Iverson actually has a very good shot at it. So last year, just giving the ranking on him, he was a player who was supposed to be third place in the GT until James had shot up in points and basically outpaced him points-wise, and mostly because he had beaten his opponent with a full max score. And so it just kind of nudged him out. But otherwise, Matt would have been in third place. So, yeah, he's a good one. What do you think he's going to play?
I'm not entirely sure. I've seen him play quite a lot. He's very versatile.
He plays Rohan and Mirkwood as a primary, and I think Mirkwood is what he might go with. Keep in mind, pure speculation. I have no idea.
I saw Rohan from him at his Historicon tournament, so that's just what's on my mind at the moment. Yeah. But he could definitely go with Mirkwood as well.
If a Rohan army starts getting top spots in Nova, that'd be awesome. Another person I think might be at the top, so I'm going to count one more DCHL player if he plays. I believe he's playing as Walker. You guys know him. He's actually been a staple on the channel in its early days, and he, very tactical player. I do not know what army he would bring, but probably either Hunter Orcs or Goblin Town.
Probably Hunter Orcs, right? He plays a lot of that.
Hunter Orcs, his Hunter Orc army is scary. So if he plays his Hunter Orcs, I'd be very interested in how that turns out. But if not that, then yeah, Goblin Town, and those are the two main armies he's pretty notorious for playing. After that, I'm going to have to start handing it off to Canadian players. All right, so let's get the easy ones out of the way. The GBHL are going to be in the top 10. Most likely. Last year, Jamie had a really bad round matchup in a hold ground sort of scenario. He had to play Horde Gondor, and he had elves. So he wasn't in the top rung, but obviously the GBHL are going to be up there. After them, though, I'm going to start handing it off to Canadian players and some of the Irish players that are coming. The Canadian players have three, I would say, top spot players who usually are on the top rung. I think Andrew Brock, I don't know what list he's bringing, but he is a Canadian champion, OSBGL champion of the previous year, and he's actually in top rung this year. Everyone knows the Canadians are used to their filth, though. They play these crazy lists. So I think you've heard about those.
Yeah, I definitely have. No. Goblin King and Isengard, it boggles the mind.
They pretty much play whatever is killer. It's like you ask them what army they're bringing, they're like, I don't know.
Evil.
I'm playing evil. We're good. Alfred's everywhere. So obviously at Nova you can't do that, but I'm sure they'll still be fine. Another player I'm interested to see. One of the ones who's in the top now is Ben Boomer for the Canadians, and he is playing Arnor, though. Now, that's going to be the main weakness. Arnor is tough. It's a really tough list to play, and so he's giving himself a challenge with that. I think Garrett Pogson from the OSBGL. Cole doesn't know a lot of these players, but
no.
For those of you Canadians who do watch the channel, you guys know these players, and so that's why I'm saying them here. And of course, a final one, I guess, if I were to really say top ranking, Very good player. So yeah, I bring up Garrett Pogson. I remember him, but I've never actually played him personally. But he's a very, very talented player. And I guess Don Barnett, he won a local GBHL tournament not GBHL, OSBGL tournament just lately. So without going into all these names, let's go into the last thing here. What lists do you think would be top run? What's the armies? Let's say top 5. I know you asked for top 10, but a lot of them are going to duplicate. Obviously, Elves.
I'm going to get more specific than that. Rivendell Knights. I think we're definitely going to see a top placing Rivendell Knight.
Rivendell Knights will be top placing somewhere up there. Absolutely. Nova scenarios rely on a lot of mobility and stuff like that. Now, the only thing that derails Rivendell Knights are Fell Beast lists, properly played ones. Which brings me to another top ranking player I think is going to do well. Is Jericho. Jericho is the New Zealand player. He's actually top ranking in the New Zealand leagues quite frequently. And he's coming, and I know he has a Fell Beast in his list, and that's kind of what thought of that. Yeah, I definitely will play him up to the top. So actually, since he has a Fell Beast in his list, we'll just say Mordor. I think Mordor. Yeah.
Given the Nova comp restrictions, Mordor is just the most extensive army list. It's going to be able to do the most things. It's definitely going to be top ranking.
And I mean, to help with the restrictions, because Evil has like really big factions and Good doesn't. Their exception list is larger for the Good side, much larger. It's actually triple in size. So Good has options as far as wizards and stuff like that. But yeah, as far as a single faction option, yeah, Mordor, it's going to be up there. And I guess beyond that, what would we say? Rivendell Knights, Lake Town. Tom Harrison already announced he's bringing Lake Town. And honestly, if it's the J. Clair Lake Town army, it's going to be rough. You guys think, if any of you new guys out there think Lake Town can't cut it, that is an army that is going to cause absolute problems. All right, guys, well, we are way over our time, so let's give it 30 more seconds. What do you think?
I don't know what else would be up there. Maybe Isengard.
Isengard will be up there.
Yeah.
Actually, Tom Clucci, DCHL member, he should do very well as well. He's bringing an Isengard force, and he looks like he's going a competitive route this year. He brought High Elves last year, did pretty well. So I think he might do pretty good.
How about Goblin Town? I mean, stripped of all the things people like to add in there, like shades and the Shadow Lord. You can't bring them in, so it won't have that. But
Goblin Town, sheer numbers alone, might be able to do it. I think it really will depend on the player. If Walker brings them, absolutely. If he doesn't, I don't know how many Goblin Town players there will be because Goblin Town doesn't have many exceptions to work with.
That's true.
So I think, it could. But I don't think we'll see it only strictly because the only one I know who will be bringing Goblin Town potentially is Walker.
All right.
And he's the only one I know is competent enough to use them correctly.
And finally, also, Harad. You hear a lot about how undercosted Harad is, but at the same time,
you almost never see them in our tournaments, though.
It's true. I don't know how things are at the GBHL meta and the New Zealand meta and the Canadian meta, but we don't see Harad very often here.
Yeah, that is really weird. Actually, if you guys look at Nova last year, of the 38 players that have Nova last year, and this year we have 60. So of the 38 we saw last year, I think there was two Harad players. It's really weird. Yeah, you'd think they're like the go-to tournament list.
They have so many undercosted units, but I think maybe undercosted units are not necessarily the key to success. I mean, being a point under, even if you spam out 20 of them, you've only saved yourself 20 points. It's not that much. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, actually, that's very true. I guess, I don't know. I'll be interested to see if Harad's up there. And I haven't heard too many Harad lists being mentioned to me. So
that can be a topic for another time, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Harad.
All right. Well, all right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed today's topics, and we will see you guys very soon.
Yes, indeed.